put up a poll as we get ready for Shannon Briggs' panel. And so if we can get a poll up here, we're going to ask, how do you or the manager of your recreational water body communicate water quality conditions? So here's that poll. Okay, and so as that's the responses are coming in, introduce Shannon Biggs from the Michigan Department of the Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. You heard from her before, and she's got a tremendous presentation on the website, and she will lead our next panel and share some of this data. Looks like listservs or websites seem to be a big way to share a lot of information, and we're going to hear more about that and how some of our other presenters are getting the word out.
All right, thank you, Steve. Yep, I'm Shannon Briggs. I'm from Michigan. I'm kind of in the middle of all of this, Spain to California, East Coast. And today we have 4 speakers for this session. And we have Luke Ginger from Heal the Bay, Santa Monica, California. He is, forgive me, I'm looking at a lot of screens. He spends a lot of his time looking for people who go to the beaches, rivers, and streams by managing the organization's recreational water quality programs. He has a bachelor's in biology from the University of St. Thomas and a master's in biology from Miami University. It says, although Luke does not consider what he does at Heal the Bay as work, but when he's not in his home office, he is hiking in the national parks or hanging out on the beach. Thank you, Luke. And his talk is going to be the Beach Report Card and Nowcast, Successes and Challenges of Public Water Quality Notifications. Then what I'm going to do is introduce Jennifer. So Jennifer, there we go. Jennifer Hassinger is a sanitarian program specialist at the Ohio Department of Health. She has been working with the recreation program team in several programs, including bathing beach monitoring and advisory notification for the past 4 years. Jennifer from Ohio Department of Health, her talk was Lake Erie Beach Monitoring and Public Notification Database, BeachGuard. Then we have, let's see, Lindsay. Lindsay Lackenmeyer is an environmental scientist at the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. Her primary focus is coordinating the beach monitoring program for South Carolina. She received her bachelor's degree in biology and marine science from Coastal Carolina University, and her master's degree is in marine science from the University of South Alabama. And her talk is the Improving the Communication Strategy for the South Carolina Beach Monitoring Program. And then the last speaker in our group was Matt Grohl. And Matt is the Chief of Stewardship of East Bay Regional Park District, over by the east side of San Francisco, covering 2 counties, 9 lakes. 5 of those are used for swimming. And he's going to talk about a lot of things about, I'll just read his title, following up on monitoring and public notification program for harmful algal blooms in recreational lakes. So what I'm trying to make my mouse land on the right screen. Sorry about that. Thank you everyone for giving us your presentations. And we had a question from online that I'm going to start out with the question online. And it was for Lindsay from South Carolina. It says, the Check My Beach website seems like a great tool. Have you considered expanding it to include other state water quality information? It would be a great one-stop shop for tourists visiting new areas. Can you provide some feedback or comment on that? And all of you, all the other panelists, please think about responding to that as well.
So we haven't quite gotten that far with Check My Beach. With Check My Beach, we've kind of been trying to take this in small incremental steps. This way we can really monitor the progress and really see how Check My Beach is working. So that's why when we rolled out Check My Beach, we did it to our tier 1 beaches first to try to monitor that progress. And so right now, our big focus is to try to expand this to our tier 2 beaches. So we haven't quite gone far as past South Carolina right now, because that's been a little bit more of our main focus. But that's definitely something to consider in the future, because we're always trying to figure out ways that we could potentially try to increase the program, trying to make it better in general, because again, our goal is to really just help educate people, let them know what their resources are, and just know that, like, because I know there's a lot of people in the state that didn't realize that we were managing a lot of the water quality. So try to get that word out to people is really important. So so that is something that we can consider in the future, or if there's other states that are considering a similar program, I'd definitely be happy to help advise them on the steps that we took, or to help them on what they think that could work for them as well. But that's an option. We just haven't quite gotten that far at this stage yet.
All right. Well, thank you, Lindsay. And Luke, I saw your head nodding quite a bit. So Luke, can you respond to that question as well?
Yeah, so in California, so first of all, I think what South Carolina has going on is really good as far as a statewide one-stop shop. There isn't an equivalent for water quality in California, but the Beach Report Card, which I run, is pretty close to that. And there's a separate program run through a government agency in California called Your Coast. And that's an app and a website that lists all the beach amenities throughout the state. However, it doesn't have the water quality information. So instead of reinventing the wheel out here, we'll probably have to look at a partnership, and we certainly have to do that. I think just to limit the places people have to look for information. I think it's really important if there's just one place they know to go to.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. And Jennifer or Matt, which one of you wants to go first on this one? Take this question to respond, Matt.
Yeah, I can answer. I mean, we don't have a comprehensive website, but on our website for our properties, East Bay Regional Park District, we do maintain active pages for all of our beaches, and so all of our lakes and recreational waters have an active web page that's regularly updated based on the testing results. So anytime someone comes, they can see that. And just in the poll question before, talked about all the different options, and we use basically all of the above. We post at the beach, we post notices at our beaches, and if there's an immediate closure or risk, that'll go on the front page of our web alerts homepage. And then we have all these listservs also that we use within our constituents, and anyone can request to get on that list to get notifications that has an interest locally. And then we have a separate list with the health departments and other interested entities to communicate our beach water quality conditions at any of our lakes.
Yeah, well, thank you, Matt. And Jennifer, can you respond to some of these questions as well from Ohio?
Yeah, so BeachGuard is the database that Ohio is currently using to store all of its water sample data for all of the beaches that are along Lake Erie's coastline, and then as well as any inland beaches, which is also accessible for the local health departments to use when they have any sort of advisories or sampling that they have done at any of their beaches. And then notification wise, we do have a map where users could go onto the website and visually see if there are any advisories in their area. We also have a notification side of that where they could sign up for a phone call, a text alert, or an email, which would be an immediate notification if a beach that they are subscribed to is put on advisory for high bacteria levels or how harmful algal bloom.
Well, thank you. That's great. So with all, this is just kind of a funny question. Has anyone ever received a call from a realtor or somebody buying a house looking for water quality, historical water quality, to verify that the place that they're going to buy is got a good lake? Have you guys ever encountered that?
I've gotten a couple people maybe buying a house that has a pond, but I haven't had any specific questions regarding larger bodies of water.
All right.
Yeah, I've never gotten quite that call, but pretty often I'll get a call from a homeowner already who's concerned about some sort of discharge they're seeing, like foam or an increased amount of trash. Yeah, I'll get those calls pretty frequently. It's like people think we're kind of the pollution police, which we are in a way, but not like that.
Right. Lindsay, were you nodding your head for a response?
I haven't gotten like that specific type of a question. I have gotten inquiries in terms of like, you could tell people are planning their vacations, and that's actually one of the big things that directed us to creating Check My Beach, to be honest, because we would get calls, or our regional office would get calls where people are planning their vacations, and they're like, oh, we saw that reports that water quality was causing some issues, and then they're like, well, tell me what that means for my vacation 3 weeks from now, or something like that. And so that was actually a lot of times it was interesting because we were doing press releases whenever we would issue temporary advisories. And the press releases we realized were targeting the wrong audience. So it wasn't reaching the people that were at the beach or any of the people that lived in the local community. It was usually reaching people in other states, and they were concerned about their vacation. We're like, well, in 3 weeks, the water quality could be fine. We just try to educate them as best we could. And so that actually, with Check My Beach and posting like the signs and everything on it, we're trying to do a better job of trying to educate people more about water quality, trying to provide them that extra resource where they could learn from it. And so when I've gotten those questions, I try to direct them best I can to our website, but then also let them know that they have educational resources that they can look up through Check My Beach now as well. And so we've decided that the beaches that do participate with Check My Beach, that we don't do press advisories with them anymore, because they are already providing that extra beach resource to educate people. But we do still post signs on the beach as well to make sure that anybody walking along the beach sees that there's a temporary advisory issued too.
Right. One of the other questions that we received is that what are our thoughts on standardizing a notification method to make it a one-stop shop, or one type of one website? And we've had one website in Michigan as well, similar to Ohio. And what I'm seeing, though, for a lot of our beaches, and all of you can respond to this too, some of our beaches use flags, some of them use signs on the beach, some of them have their own county or local website to also post results and notification. So I'm kind of going to respond to that question overall by saying, I think we have to use multiple methods, and using one type of a media or one website isn't going to cut it. You got to cover multiple media outlets, different ways to reach people. Some people want certain ways. Everybody has their own way of being reached. The other thing has been, has anyone had any experience reaching out to a specific type of a community that is just a little bit harder to reach? Does anyone have a story about how you've reached out to a very specific community or found a way to connect to somebody that you didn't know you were missing? And Matt, you were kind of nodding your head.
Well, yeah, I was nodding, but before you said a community we were missing, it was more, there's some groups that are very interested, sort of neighborhood associations or homeowners associations or other friends of a watershed group that we've done special sort of announcements with or worked with on those groups individually on specific issues. But I think the question you're asking now is a good one, and something we would be good to think about, groups that are receiving the message. I mean, one thing we have done is post at the beaches, makes it we're posting in multiple languages, and then also doing outreach through other media outlets that may target certain ethnic groups is one way we've targeted messaging at times. But I'm curious to hear others' answers.
Yeah, can I pick on Luke, Lindsay, or Jennifer to respond?
I'll go. I say the biggest difficulty for us is, Lake Erie is easy for us to mandate as a whole, and that's pretty uniform in our notification system. However, inland lakes are a little bit more difficult because they aren't always monitored. Some of them, local health departments don't have a beach program, and so callers sometimes are wondering why their beach might not be monitored as opposed to one in another county. So that's a little bit of a challenge for us.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is definitely something that comes up in California a lot. And Shannon, I think you're correct in that you need a lot of tools to reach everybody. Yeah, part of it is like there are just remote stretches of coastline where it's not feasible to, update a sign every now and then. Signs get vandalized too. So I forgot who, but somebody had like short-term notifications and like long-term notifications. I think that's a good strategy. Yeah, Heal the Bay has done some targeted outreach at the surfer community a little bit. So we've gotten we used to have our links for our beach report card on like a website where surfers will check what the wave conditions are. So kind of reach them that way. There's some interesting water quality notification stuff in the LA River. LA Sanitation has set up this like stoplight type system that flashes different colors depending on what the water quality is, and they can control that from just a computer. So that's a really cool solution that they've come up with. And then this is separate from water quality, but Healed Bay goes out and we educate anglers in the ocean about certain types of fish that might be toxic. So, we go out there with folks who speak different languages and educate the anglers kind of one-on-one. So that might even need to be a strategy. I know that's a lot of work, but yeah, to reach certain communities, you kind of have to do that.
Yeah, and for anybody on the call or anybody that's listening right now, if you missed the talk, what Lindsay did in South Carolina is they, instead of updating a sign on all their beaches, like somebody has to drive out there and flip the sign saying open or closed, you guys put out a QR code where people would show up with their phone and their cell phone. They would take a picture of the QR code and it would direct them to a website or an app or something, right? And so that was kind of an efficient way to let people know that here's a sign, if you want a recent update for this beach, this is where you get it. And so Lindsay, can you respond a little bit about how the QR code works?
Yeah, and so we still, just to kind of clarify a little bit, we still do post temporary advisory signs on the beach regardless, but we do have to try to educate people a little bit more. We've worked with a lot of local municipalities and counties that manage a lot of these beach access points to post signs on the beach to promote Check My Beach. And we try to keep Check My Beach as kind of like a little bit of a fun signage to try to encourage people to go to the website. So we don't say that it's necessarily for beach safety or anything, but we do have that QR code to try to drive people to see, okay, what is this? And so with Check My Beach, we've tried to create a beach resource overall for people. And so we have information about water quality, we have information about rip currents, and just like what the flag safety system in South Carolina means. So if you do see any of those flags posted along the beach, you can actually understand right away, oh shoot, it's not good to go out in the water right now, or if there's potentially any like dangerous animals or something that they've seen. So we wanted to make a great beach resource for people. So with the QR code, of course, to try to encourage people, because we wanted to make sure this information is getting targeted to people at the beach, and to try to encourage them to check on the status of advisories online, because it's quicker for us to update online by the time somebody is able to drive out to the beach and post that sign. They still do post that sign, but if you want that information quicker, to go on our websites, the most efficient way to go on it. So all they have to do is, of course, scan that QR code, and that way they're not sitting there on the beach just typing in a website on their phone. It's just a quick scan and it will take you to it. And then they could save that website from there on out. And then they can always go to our DHEC website to check on the status of advisories that way. But we just are glad that we're able to provide this one-stop beach resource, because with Check My Beach, It's not only like with our water quality, we do also provide links to local weather. It's got information on like the surf report, it links to that as well. And a lot of our partners, their beach area pages too. So if people wanted to look up information about their local beaches, they can go to there as well. And this way they can look up whether it's beach rules or just general information. It gives them that one-stop shop. So they don't have to continuously look on Google for all this information. It's just all provided for them right there.
Right. Luke, Matt, or Jennifer, do you want to comment on some of any of the local signs that might point back to other things? Do you have anything like that, Luke?
We took a crack at designing that a few years ago with a QR code, and that's something we have been meaning to kind of circle back to. Yeah, I think part of the trouble is, since we're a nonprofit, we really don't have authority to be, posting these signs. So we have to convince somebody to post it for us. So that's just a difficulty we deal with.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the funny things that happened in Michigan for a while was that monitoring a beach is voluntary. We'll just start with that. It's all voluntary action. And some places were monitoring, and they would have a beach closure, and they would do the right thing and say, the water here at this beach is going to be, we don't want to have anybody swimming today. But then a beach not very far down the road that was not monitored would pipe up in the news and say, we're open. And so there was this, we're always open. But the problem was they were never monitoring. And so some of the communities that were monitoring were frustrated with the other communities that weren't. And you can imagine the back and forth. And so we had one of our legislators passed a bill in Michigan, Senator Patty Burkholz, and it said that if a beach is offered to the public, it has to have a sign on it indicating whether it's monitored or not. And if it is monitored, they have to provide where you can find the results. And so that's a law in Michigan. And so for each one of you, for Luke or Lindsay or Jennifer and Matt, I don't know about your lakes on, monitoring, but have you encountered different places where they don't want to have monitoring and they want to keep a perception of, has anyone had to deal with that kind of a situation before where you work?
Yeah, we have had some questions about that in areas that get less usage. And so then there's also some questions about that, why we don't monitor, why we would monitor that. And we've often thought about that. But all our beaches that get regular usage and even well below the standards for what's required. Basically all of our freshwater beaches are monitored. This is more, what I'm talking about is more some obscure beaches that aren't really official swimming areas, but sort of dedicated people go there. And so there have been some questions about whether we should sample at those sites or how we would report that if we did. Since it isn't an official area. And then back to the QR codes in the data, we do use a stoplight system. It's not nearly as sophisticated as what Luke's talking about, where it's an electronic one. This is more, we just use stoplights to communicate risk. And in some of those places, we use those signs and we don't have the other data behind it. We'll use a QR code or other signs. So people who want to see the data and want to see the real information, use that QR code to get to the website, which will show the specific bacteriological results or the harmful algal concentration or whatever we're reporting on. So we do use QR codes in that way, but not for other purposes.
Yeah. Most of our talks were Luke and Lindsay and Jennifer. I think your talks were about E. coli at beaches. And I know, Jennifer, you talk a little bit about harmful algal blooms, that your website also allows that, communicating harmful algal blooms. Is that right?
We do have the ability to post when there are harmful algal bloom advisories, but it's not mandated. So we just post advisories on the website when they are sampled for.
Okay. And so for us in the Great Lakes, I think we have green. Green is the bad color for us. But for the ocean beaches, you also have to worry about the red tides. I might want to just pick on you, Matt, because you do the freshwater. How do you communicate these harmful algal blooms to people? Because it's not exactly the same thing as E. coli. What are some of the differences that you've seen when you have to communicate an algal bloom?
Yeah, I think, the challenge is perception. I mean, and people understanding the risk. I mean, we use the similar light system, so green is still good. We usually don't use green in harmful algal blooms, but it's more yellow is caution, and then warning is danger and closed. If you look at the state guidance in California, there's some specific tiers, but we eliminate kind of the higher tier because basically once we get at the moderate danger tier, we close. I mean, because once we're above the certain standard, so we've kind of eliminated that top tier and made our more higher tier a red color. But the challenge is once we do that and communicate the results, most people don't understand the concentrations and what they mean. And there's various toxins and most people in the public, even after explained, don't always understand the specific toxin we might be managing for with implications. So we often focus on more the behaviors and also the physical signs of what to avoid. Our biggest issue has been dog usage in areas where it was posted. I mean, we did have an issue at one of our lakes that really kicked off a broader program, and we were monitoring harmful algal blooms and we were posting signage. But at this lake, what we found was we were posting at all the main sites, but this lake had multiple entrance points. So people came in from a neighborhood entrance. It was not an official entrance, but didn't see the sign. So what we've had to get very more deliberate and specific since that time, when we have these toxic blooms conditions happening, making sure anyone that reaches the lake sees multiple signs before they get there. Now, even in that, we've seen where people will just ignore the signs and allow their dog to go in and say, oh, my dog's fine. Oh, there's no scum here. There's no, and so we often, I said it before, but we often try to communicate that what scums or things might be happening that would show that there's a problem, and avoid people to try to teach people to avoid those areas. But often in some of those cases, we have to do direct people on the ground, meeting with those individuals and trying to talk to them and communicate the risk more actively, and explain it in those situations where people aren't obeying the restrictions. And even in that, we get mixed results. Some people just continue to ignore you, but at that point, you've really done everything you can and to communicate the risk. But I think that's often one of the challenges too, because and on the other side, we get a lot of people calling up and saying, oh my gosh, the lake's green, or there's this problem, it looks really horrible, or we have this yellow green scum, and it's often filamentous algae. And then we have to explain that, oh, well, this is, and explain those differences. But that's often one of the real challenges, I think, with harmful algal blooms is really communicating to the public what the specifics are at a specific lake and situation and what the risk is. Because as we know, people have different tolerances for these risks. We can tell them all the time on the bacterial side, don't swim 72 hours after a rain event. And yet at some of our unmanaged access points, people will go in during the rain event.
Right. This is also probably, I don't know if any of our presenters have had this experience, but have you had to talk to reporters about, there's a lot of bad press going on about a lake water quality situation. Maybe a dog has died or something, there's something not right about this lake and you have to talk to reporters. What is your approach when you have to try to walk a reporter through this and they're sticking a microphone in your face and, it's going to be live at 6 and anybody want to respond to that?
Well, yeah, I can take that because we have to deal with that. And since we're working on a very local level, our main advice is we work with our public affairs staff, and we already have a standing list of talking points and the ways we would try to explain these in a concise manner. And then with any specific situation, we'll also kind of review those talking points, refine them with our public information officer, and do a quick kind of practice session to make sure we can get it quickly. Because the challenge is it's not as much the content or the specific information, it's what you said before. So you have this quick time and you're on news and it's live and you only have maybe 1 minute to communicate the full situation. So we try to be very mindful and thoughtful of how we answer those first few questions to really characterize, introduce the situation. And then when we get to the more follow-up questions, we can respond to the specifics, but try to, at least when they ask us the first question, give an overview of the situation, what the specific results are, why it's closed, and then when we think it could potentially reopen, even though there's often uncertainty. But often the public wants to know how long, or maybe we might say, well, we'll be testing again on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or whatever that day is, and let them know when they'll have another updated result, and understanding. And then I guess the initial part of the answer is always kind of understanding what the basis is, whether it's our state guidance is usually what our basis is, and what parameter the exceedance is related to. But we often don't go much beyond that, in these short news interviews because we just don't have the time to discuss the underlying conditions.
Right. Been there before. Anybody else want to comment on that?
I haven't dealt with reporters directly. I know my manager definitely has, especially in regards to like beach and water quality and everything. But it's really all the same that Matthew had said too, is we've been educated by our media department to make sure we stick with talking points. Even if the reporter does try to kind of sway you away from it, to try to redirect back to those talking points too, and to really focus on like the educational pieces, the points that you're trying to get across to people and trying to make them understand the science behind it best that we can. And the goal is, of course, not to freak people out, but to just make sure that they're informed. And so if they do decide to enter the water later on that day or whatnot, that it is their educated decision to do so, that they're making that choice. And so to try to, just always stick to the things that we know and not go off topic.
Mm-hmm. Luke, you want to say something?
Yeah, so this is something I have quite a bit of experience with, and what we always try to do is, like Lindsay said, make sure the public knows what they're supposed to do. Number one, to like keep safe, and then number two, we always like to use it as an opportunity to shed light on the broader issue. So we always like to draw the connection between the watershed and what's happening in the water. So this is pollution that's originating throughout the whole watershed and flowing in through a storm drain or something. So we like to kind of acknowledge that, like the reason why this issue is happening here, and just get people thinking about the broader issue in general.
Right. And I see that, we've got about 14 minutes left for this session. And so, there might be something that you haven't thought about that you wanted to say. And one of the things I try to help all of our local health departments is that when the reporters come, they're coming because they sniff out bad news. They want us, they're doing their job, harping on some issue that seems to be controversial. And what we try to do is take advantage of that situation. Like, here's some attention that's coming and you're going to be put on the spotlight. So it does help to have an idea of what you want to say now. For us in the Great Lakes, it's 80 degrees outside. It's really nice, but nobody's swimming yet. And now is probably the time to have those talking points ready to go so that you're not caught off guard. Because when these things happen, you don't know when they're going to happen. But the other thing that we try to encourage is to say, the reason we know there's a problem is because we were checking. Would it have been better had you not known? What we're trying to do we are doing the right thing. We are looking, we are testing. And part of the reason we're testing is because there is a risk of contamination. And that risk of contamination is coming from a storm drain or some other source. So I kind of use this whole opportunity when you have a chance to engage with media to start walking them down that street, to have that conversation, try to bring people up to speed as to why is a beach closed? As soon as there is a beach closure, they're bringing out their finger. Who's it? Who did it? They want to know because they want it fixed. And I don't know if you guys have any other parting thoughts that you'd like to contribute to your experience on working on this.
Yeah, I could just add, we have had a similar situation that is, it's more we have, so we're a special park district. So we operate all of and maintain our own lands as a separate special district in the state. We're similar to a county, a park agency, or we're very large though, so maybe some of our property is similar to state parks in many of your areas. But what we often have is a municipal entity that's adjacent to us that has an issue with the sewage spill. And so then when we have to, but we're the ones that are managing water quality and doing the reporting out. So when we do the interviews, often we've had the chance where reporters try to pit us against each other or make us say, and those cities are often our partners too in fixing the problem. So we're often working with them and we don't want to necessarily disparage them. We want to be factual about what happened, but we don't necessarily want to criticize their maintenance or criticize other specific things they're doing in that forum. We might talk to them about it privately and say, we're concerned about this, but we want to really try to maintain those professional relationships in the public, because one, we often don't know, and we shouldn't be responding about the cause or what's happening, because we don't have the specific technical information. But the reporters will often try to push you and make you make a statement about how you feel about it, or what they should do differently. And so we often don't. So if we don't have that information, or if we haven't been told, we often don't want to share that. But what we've also had is, so we've had these sewage spills have created bacteriological issues and obviously introduced nutrients into the system. But in those same lengths, we've had recurring harmful algal blooms that are based on the natural conditions of the watershed and the function of that system and the sediment really layer, and the nutrients in the sediment, not the pulse of nutrients that comes in with the sewage release. So, but we have to be very careful with how that's taught, because they often want to say, oh, you had the sewage release, oh, that's why you're having these algal blooms. And we have to correct them and say, well, that contributes to the problem, but that's not what's the real cause. There's this whole, and that, I mean, kind of back to what Shannon was saying earlier about how we try to really inform about the overall situation. So when we have more time in that, we'll explain the underlying conditions, the history of the watershed, the history of that lake system, and what we know about the nutrient cycling that really kicks off a lot of these bloom conditions. But try to be very specific when we get a time to do that, and not try to either point fingers or make assumptions or assertions when they're made in the media that these certain things are causing other things. And so we try to really correct that record and be very specific about what we do know in a certain situation.
Right, right. That's a good point, that you're going to try to mend media relations and, keep all of your partners together. So that's definitely something that we keep track of too. And you can't really throw any, you got to be very careful about who you're going to try to, you don't want to say anything that's going to build, ruin your connections with your partners.
Yeah, that I completely agree with that, especially all the work that we've been doing with like Check My Beach and everything. So one thing I'll say, and this kind of coincides with what you had said, Shannon, in terms of kind of talking with the media kind of preemptively. One thing that we do is we actually try to host a little bit of to kind of kick off our beach season, which starts on May 1st, is we typically try to host kind of like a media press conference just to go over what our beach monitoring program is, some of the changes we may have done, provide extra information. And so we invite the media to come and talk to us, and they can go over any questions, and to try to already kind of establish that good relationship with them as well. We always invite our partners to also come too. And some of these cases too are good ways to highlight different things that our partners are doing, because of course our partners, like the local municipalities, don't want to have bad water quality either. And so it's important for all of us to work together best we can. So anytime that we can talk to the media too, it's good for like us to promote things that they have been doing. For instance, we've got like Myrtle Beach and North Myrtle Beach that a lot of people don't quite realize they monitor their water quality. So it's not just us doing it during our monitoring season. They monitor their beaches year round, and they collaborate and share that data with us, and we share our data back and forth with them to try to work better together on everything. Another thing that a lot of those areas are doing too is to try to create outfalls from their stormwater drains, because they're trying to increase the water quality. So not all people know that. They just see the old articles saying that, oh, the stormwater is causing this. And it's like, well, they've actually changed these outfalls to be like a mile or so offshore to help improve the water quality in the area. So that's another thing that we always want to try to do, is to try to promote the good news stories, the different efforts that a lot of our partners are trying to make, and like the work that we've been doing together to show that we do truly care about the community and our environment as well.
Yeah, that's great, Lindsay. Jennifer or Luke, do you want to comment on anything like that? You're good, Jennifer. Luke, how are you doing?
Yeah, I actually wanted to answer a question from earlier about like pushback on like monitoring. I think that's an interesting topic. I think there's been a little bit of pushback here and there about monitoring at maybe a very popular or a highly visited beach. Because poor water quality score could impact visitorship there. But I think the bigger thing is honestly funding. Like if counties or municipalities are receiving the funding for monitoring, they're probably going to do it. And, yeah, there's always kind of that balance. You only have so much funding, and yeah, you have to make that. You have to stretch that as far as you can. But then there's also some interesting like jurisdictional things too. It's like if your county is required to monitor, but some of your beaches are in the state park system, you know, whose job is that, or in the national park system or national forests. So yeah, I think there's also some jurisdictional issues involved with that as well. It's a big topic.
Yeah, yes, it is. It is. Trying to think of, have we left anything out? Because we've got about 6 minutes left. And I'm looking at the different questions. I'm just checking in the chat. No, I think one of the things we were gonna, do you also, on top of your daily media, you know, you've got these live media streams, and I know, Luke, you do your beach report, like a report card, and that's on a weekly basis, right? Yep, okay. So do any of the other situations, do you guys write up annual reports giving like an overview of, you know, of all the monitoring data over the year? Do you get requests for a data summary for the whole year? Because now you have this big website, you have all this information, and the reporters come along and they say, all right, now that you've got the whole year's summary of our data, what are the top 10 worst beaches? Do you get those? You know, how do you, have you ever had to deal with that yet?
I haven't gotten that request specifically from anyone. I have gotten requests though from just, from my knowledge, it seemed like a general person just asking for beach data, and all of our data, people can request it and we will provide it. And so I remember from actually this past summer, somebody specifically wanted to know what was the most recent data for basically, I think, our first like 40 monitoring sites, because they were planning their vacation and they wanted to know. So I directed them to our website and everything, but then I also gave them our Excel sheet with all the data that was most recent from, I think, the past couple of monitoring portions, but they are allowed to request it. And so if they do want to have that raw data, we will give it to them. We do also try to make sure that people know the percent exceedances for a lot of our monitoring locations. So we do have this interactive GIS map where people can see a lot of all of our beach access locations along the coast in South Carolina, but you also get to see all of our sampling locations as well. And so the color of those sampling locations will tell you the current status, whether it's got no active advisory, a temporary advisory, long-term advisory, or if that beach is closed. But if you click on that, it will also update you with the last, it'll tell you the last sampling date, and it will tell you over the past 5 years what the average percent exceedance is. So kind of, we don't give them a report card, but we would say that if it was less than 10%, that would basically be an A or whatnot. But anything that's over that, we do issue long-term advisories, but people can see what those percent exceedances are over those 5 years as well.
Yep. And I'm going to go into the chat real quick. One of the health departments, one of the things they do is, like you mentioned, Lindsay, starting up the beach season, they contact all of the beach managers to let them know that their beaches are going to be monitored and where how they're going to communicate. So it kind of gives them that pre-beach monitoring season meeting saying, here we go, this is how things are going to roll out. This is what we plan on doing. So that's probably a really good idea to touch base with everybody that you're going to be involved with that summer for that season. And Luke, did you want to, or Matt? I wasn't sure if you guys were going to respond to something.
Well, I did see a question in the chat about COVID. I mean, one thing, we don't necessarily do an annual report. We rely on others that do the report cards and things like that for some of our beaches. But when when we've graded badly or we had an issue at a beach, we will often do focus presentations to community groups or others to explain what happened there. and what's going on, because often local constituents may have concerns about that, or wanting to better understand the underlying conditions that created that bad grade. And so that can even happen through the media or through our board meetings and things like that. We have been doing more regular annual summaries of our harmful algal bloom situations, because we're doing a lot more on remediation and management and trying to treat those areas or do things to manage the nutrients to reduce the blooms. And we've introduced some oxygenation systems and other things that are going to be covered that'll be talked about tomorrow. So because of that, we've been doing regular reports and presentations on those systems, and then on how we're looking at how to manage our lakes to reduce harmful algal blooms.
Yeah.
But as far as COVID, one thing we've had is, since we've had reduced usage in many of our sites, we've had a new thing in some of our freshwater beaches. So we're having more vegetation growing and more things growing on the edge of the beach that are creating other challenges for harmful algal blooms and other things, and just safety now. So now that we're reopening a lot of things and getting prepared for a full open summer season this year, we've had to do a lot more removal of aquatic vegetation, or even clearing of filamentous algae that's kind of coming into swim areas that it just didn't happen in the past when we had regular usage and regular people coming in and out of those areas.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Matt. And Steve's here to usher us off onto the next break. So I don't want to be standing in the way of anybody's break, but the question about COVID, that was a really good, interesting question. We probably could have had a session on it. Everybody's been responding differently. Some places are closed, some places are open. Some in Michigan, our state parks were very full. Everybody went outside, and as soon as it was nice, we did that. So I'm sure there's 100 different responses to that. And
we had those same issues. So I know we're wrapping up. We had those same issues. I mean, when I was talking about some of our closed swim beaches, but there are other areas where our usage has been 30% to 50% more than normal. And so weekdays are like weekends, and weekends are like holidays.
Right. So with that, Steve, we're going to turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Shannon, and thank you to everybody on this panel. This is the talk about, the stress of having a microphone stuck in your face and news at 6. You all have been at it longer than anybody else. This is the marathon panel right here, and you did a spectacular job.